David Kramer, welcome to the Forward One podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Excited to have you here, man. You're
thank you.
become a good friend, and we learn a lot from one another.
True.
And we're excited to share that wisdom with our audience.
Yeah.
And I also feel like David does things differently. And
For sure.
And that tremendous amount of success. And if you look across the board, the people that we interview that are very successful, I still think David does things differently.
Yeah, very purposeful. And your business model in certain respects, and we'll unpack that a little bit, is unique for sure.
Well,
so
I feel good about myself. So thank you. My day is complete.
Yes, there you go.
That's great. Yeah. Podcast over.
Yeah.
So maybe before we get into that,
Yeah.
it's always good, I think, to have a little bit of background on sort of where you grew up and quickly, like,
Sure.
how did you get into real estate and when did that happen?
Sure. I grew up in LA, single mom in the 60s. She worked all day. And then when I was quite young, started going to school at night. I grew up in Culver City, which back in the day was not necessarily the best location to live.
Interesting.
we know that.
Yep.
You do, right. I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
And so went through the public school system, moved from Culver City to West LA on Tilden, Palms and Sepulveda, and went to Palms Junior High and then Hamilton. My mom eventually became a court reporter.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of heard a lot about the law growing up.
Mhm.
And then she married an attorney when I was about 12. And then I heard a lot more about the law. And I always used to joke I was deposed during dinner growing up.
Wow, I like that.
So I think that'll give you some background growing up. Wasn't necessarily the best student. I was always told I had a lot of potential and never used it. Probably, now we talk about ADD, but I was always very distracted with things. And it wasn't thought about in the schools.
Sure.
It's just like, we're going to teach
You're
at you and not with
misbehaved.
you. Yeah, I did. And so went from Hamilton to like a summer in Santa Monica College and then Valley College while I was still in high school, and met somebody whose dad owned a real estate company in Beverly Hills. And he said, maybe you should talk to my dad. And I honestly had no idea what I wanted to do. Real estate was not the profession it is today. It wasn't looked up at. It was kind of looked down at mostly. But for some reason, it sparked something in me. And I thought, this is exactly what I want to do. I don't know why. It just resonated with me.
Also, sales is very different than sales is very different than being a lawyer or being a court reporter. And when I grew up, and I imagine we're similar vintages, it wasn't just real estate sales, but in my family, it was like sales people, period, were sort of looked down upon.
Right. Because you don't need the education, and you don't need that to be successful, and it's not a sort of a barrier to entry. So I think that's part of the,
And my work history was I was mowing lawns at 8 for the neighbors for a quarter. I started waxing cars, and then the few jobs that I did have, like working in an accountant's office and a bagel store, and some other things where I got an hourly wage, I thought I felt very limited and confined. And there was I know it sounds crazy when you're like working in a retail store, like no entrepreneurial spirit, but I had come up with things that could make it a little more efficient. And they're like, just do what we ask you.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't a meritocracy, right? But it's just what like get rewarded for your performance.
Yeah.
Performance based.
Yeah. And I literally thought about, because everyone said, is it commission only? You're not getting a salary. I said, I will take the risk of zero income versus unlimited income. And that was kind of the way I thought about it, even at, 20.
And so that's what I was going to ask you. You were around 20 when that.
About 20 when I met Rick Hupp. His dad was Jack Hupp, which was an old firm from the 50s in Beverly Hills. I also thought about Beverly Hills. You can always sell down, but you can never sell up. So if I worked in Sherman Oaks, nothing against Sherman Oaks at all, but I'm probably not listing a 20, 30, $40 million home in Beverly Hills, where I knew if I was in Beverly Hills, I could certainly list a house in Sherman Oaks, just as an example.
I can't help myself. I always use the term Beverly Hills travels. meaning you go anywhere and everyone knows Beverly Hills, to your point. And then you can sell anywhere. No one's going to say you're a Beverly Hills agent. You don't belong in this neighborhood. Like,
I've heard that a lot.
Right.
And the answer is, bring it on. I'll work with you. I'll work anywhere. And I still have people who are surprised when I show up for a listing appointment and it's, $750. Business is business. Don't be so proud. Just keep going.
Yeah. Yep. Just for frame of reference, because, this last couple of years have been weird for brokerage, et cetera. What was a top selling year for you in volume?
I know you're going to not believe this. I don't really track my sales that much. I know people are very goal oriented and vision board oriented. I'm not.
Sure.
I am keep it moving oriented.
Yeah.
I know I've done some pretty substantial years. I saw it on an ad last week. I just don't remember. It's certain things I don't focus on, which probably screws up a lot of the other podcasts where they're giving you instructions on how to, set goals.
Well,
so give us a couple, how about this? Give us a couple bigger deals that'll at least help us get to that. Like, what are some of the bigger deal, even you don't have to name addresses, just what are the dollar amounts, price point?
Right. Well, the first really big deal I did was Spelling Manor. It was 2011, I believe. And I was going through a very tumultuous time in my life. And I was given the story is always kind of fascinating. And I was given a buyer and I was told the cap was 25 million. And they wanted traditional and would love brick, would love a view. And there was all these criteria and absolutely no work. They do not want to do work. They're going to get married and they want to move right in.
25 million. That's a fair request. They want a $25 million house, but they don't want to do any work.
Yeah.
Fair request.
Yeah.
Reasonable.
Yeah.
I sold them an $85 million fixer.
Wow.
So, so that was my big sale. If you want to talk about it, it was the largest sale in the country at the time, residential sale, obviously. I just followed where they wanted to go, essentially, created options, and sold them what they wanted.
All right. So roughly in the busiest year, roughly how many transactions do you think you've done?
Well, I knew one year we did 65 sales. So it was a big year.
And that was what year?
20, I think it was 21.
2021.
I think it was 21.
Okay.
Yeah. It was 20 or 21. We just had a very big year because of COVID and we just had a banner year.
And so I know where you're going.
Oh, yeah.
So what was the average price point? Or give us,
I don't know. I mean, it was probably mid 200s,
Yeah. In terms of, So in terms of total sales volume, mid 200
with probably some really high ones and some
and some low ones.
Yeah.
And so,
so we're talking about $250 million
in
plus.
1 year.
In 1 year.
And that's really all we need.
That's so our audience can get a frame of reference on who we're speaking with.
That we're with real estate royalty.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
All right.
And so come back to your early on in your career, you get piqued by this introduction. When did you actually officially start and get committed to real estate?
When it clicked and I realized what I wanted to do, it gave me a sense of purpose. And what I wanted to do was learn the business, which wasn't common at the time, be the best at it I could. And I was at Cal State Northridge. So I started taking real estate finance, real estate law, real estate principles. That was one of the first years you actually had to take real estate principles to get a license. And I studied. And while I was still in school, I started selling. And my first 6 months, I remember this clearly. My first house was either 125,000 or 225,000. It was in Reseda. It was my best and oldest friend. I sold him a house.
Nice.
And I sold 6 houses in 6 months.
Wow.
And I quickly realized, and the market was good.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized that, I can do this and do it well and hustle. I also quickly realized I was at the wrong firm. even though I learned so much from them, they were very formal. They wanted all the offers typed. They wanted it reviewed by the broker. I was a new agent. I get it, especially now looking back. I didn't do any of that. I wrote it on a car hood, which is what he specifically said not to do. I made the deal. I got escrow instructions. I proofed them, and I delivered it on his desk the next day after I'd made a deal. And he did not take well to that.
Of course,
And I said, listen, it's a choice between me making money and competing or not. So I quickly transitioned after 6 months to another firm, which was Asher Dan back in the day, who was also just a legend in the industry.
Yep.
And I was fairly cocky and arrogant. So I'll say this for everybody who's a new agent and makes a deal and thinks they know it all. Don't do that. And I was so confident in my abilities that after 6 months, and I made $50,000. And I thought,
just a lot of money at the time
in school and at the time. And so of course I projected, I could do math. And unfortunately the economy disagreed. We had a recession. The next year I made 18.9, which was about what I owed in taxes from the unpaid taxes for my first 6 months.
Look at that.
What year was that?
89.
1989.
And then 90.
Right.
I always say be humble or be humbled. You choose.
Correct.
Right.
And then the following year I made another 18,000. But if you start doing the math and living expenses and everything else, I was way behind credit card debt. My debit card got seized, which is a really fun thing. I put it in the machine and it just kept it. And it says it's been seized by the,
I remember
you'll never forget that. I'm sure.
Never forget that.
Yeah. Back in the day.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need to do something. My parents said, why don't you get a real job? I remember that pretty clearly.
Right.
And I said, because this is what I was born to do. I said that to my parents. I was like, I love this business. It's great. I'm not giving up. And I started at that point creating alliances with people, with escrow, title, and lending. And that's something that I think agents really don't fully understand is, first of all, really understand what they do.
Yep.
Don't just, say, hey, great. And, let's work together. Walk me through a transaction. Walk me through what does title insurance mean? What can go wrong? Where do you get claims? I did the same thing with escrow, title, and lending and learned the business. Well, one of the lenders worked for CalFed Bank. They started getting foreclosures. And he said, I'm going to put you up to sell foreclosures. And, now I'm like 25.
Wow.
Broke. And for some reason they liked me. They had all these other options, but they liked me. And very quickly I started getting on their list of high net worth sales, Beverly Hills.
Yep.
And so learned how to sell differently.
Yep.
Because you're dealing with boards, you're dealing with, lawyers, you're dealing with a lot of different decisions. And I loved that. It was familiar. It was comfortable. It was challenging. It was fun. And I learned that part of the market really well. And I quickly realized it's not going to be forever. So I then started getting into trust sales, 94, and loved that. And it was very, again, similar to what I was doing with foreclosures.
If I may, early in the podcast, say how amazing this is because you're coming at it from a way that's very different. Like, for example, when you go back to the first thing I was doing is I was mowing lawns and I was, washing cars and, and I didn't like the regular job. Like every great salesperson that we interview basically says that. And I've got the same story.
Ace Landscaping. We had Ace Land, me and my friend. It was unbelievable with our truck.
Everybody. It's just, it's the beginning of that entrepreneurial journey is when people get out and they're like, well, wait a minute. Okay. So that's like right down the 100%,
okay. So I'm not special. That's what you're saying.
Every
in that respect,
every special realtor almost every special real, like 90% of the special realtors have that story. So it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because we get a chance to see these things as we talk more and more. And then when you go to the escrow lending and title and say, geez, I'm new at the business. Let me like really see what you guys do. Almost every special realtor that we interview has not done that.
I was going to say does not do that. Exactly.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, you're out in the world with these people. So, you'll do, I guarantee you, we don't even have to ask. He's done deals with some of the biggest realtors around. They have no idea, even though they've been in the business for all these years. And, similarly, I own a title company, which in California is rare. And I took a day and said, you know what, I want to sit with a title officer. And so I'm effectively his boss. He's very busy, and I'm like, I promise I won't interrupt you, like I won't get in the way too much, but I want to see like what this looks like. And I learned a lot. The biggest thing that I learned was how little I knew, because I was like, wow, not only am I learning a lot, but I would need 10 days here to like, know really what's going on. And so that approach, and so that's when you say, 25 and, was kind of surprised that the banks and these guys were, geez, I wonder why they were interested in me. There's your answer.
Yep.
Right. And then
curiosity, initiative, and obviously
professionalism.
Totally.
I rewrote their book, their manual.
Okay.
Not entirely, but I changed a lot of their manuals.
Oh, of the banks manuals. Yeah. Oh, I love it. See, there you go.
And obviously that knowledge just puts you in a position to create that much more value for others. And so many people just don't get what would appear to be obvious.
And the other thing too, which is unique, but can be universalized. The other unique thing is that most great realtors are very successful that we interview. They just like, if it were a trust sale, they'd be like, like there's complications and stuff that, it's just be easier to do a different deal. Now, if it's a big ticket item, then they want to pretend they know how to do it. And you've dealt with that also. But you're also creating this niche inside of a sales operation, inside of a sales business that's unique, because a lot of salespeople don't want to do that. And the last thing that I'll say too is that one of the struggles that we that realtors have, because we coach twice a week, and the majority of those realtors that come to our video and in-person coaching are newer, and they just don't have a good way to articulate value. Right. And so what is the value you're going to bring? And right now, where we have, when you started, you could create value by understanding a neighborhood. I still think that there's a lot of value in that. Yeah. But now it was before Zillow. It was before, these other aggregators and ways that people can really research things without a realtor. And now is a time to have specialized skill to differentiate yourself. You have to have, everybody that listens to this podcast must ask themselves the question of where do I set myself apart? Where can I add real value that other people are not adding? And if you don't have an answer to that question, it's okay. Keep asking yourself that question. It will eventually manifest. But that's the right away, very interesting.
So come back to that trust piece, because I know that's one of the things that you do currently that is very unique.
Yes.
So
I wanted to learn, and that's the other thing is, and I say this to brokers, because people will sit down and say, my kid wants to get in real estate, or I want to get in real estate. Can you help me? I want to get in the high end. I get all these questions. And so I'll ask them this question. I go, how much do you want to make? And they go, well, I don't know, a lot. And I go, what's a lot? Do you want to make 100,000? No. Do you want to make 3, 5, 500? Yes. I go, okay. So let's explore who makes $500,000 a year in society. Doctors, lawyers, professionals. And what do they do to make that money? They go to college, they get a degree, they put in their time.
Top of the class.
Working. They take continuing education. They show up on time. They know their business. So tell me what you have done to make $500,000 a year. And there's usually kind of and I go, no, give me specifics. Like, tell me what you've done to learn this business. And it always tends to go the same way, although every so often I'm really surprised and impressed. And then I'll ask, do you know the contract? And it's yes. Tell me what this clause means. Well, and then we get into this conversation. I'm like, listen, we have one contract and we have a pretty defined role in a simple thing. Essentially it's simple and, almost anyone can do it. The question is how well. So treat it like a business, learn it like a professional, understand the aspects of where things can go right and wrong. Sure, 500's easy at that point.
There are no shortcuts to success is the bottom line, and preparation and knowledge and doing the reps. And these are the things that I think, and especially, with the TV shows and reality TV, there's this perception that agents can make a small fortune by basically doing virtually nothing, but putting on, a nice outfit and is just not reality.
And we know those agents do hustle and they work hard and they put in a lot of time, whether it looks like it or not. And the other thing is that when you think about, you're talking about value. So anyone can handle a real estate transaction until something goes wrong. Yeah. I mean, listen, we've all been involved in multiple transactions through the years, and 90% of them go fine.
Yes.
Some are hard. The people are difficult. All of that's fine. But when something actually goes wrong, your background and knowledge of escrow, title, and lending makes the difference between that transaction going through and ideally no litigation.
Right.
And again, if you, and what I always say is when it goes right, it's great. When it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. There doesn't tend to be a middle where it's like a little wrong. And I also find people are very short-sighted. It's like, if you have to spend $3,000 or $5,000 of your entire commission to get rid of something, you do it.
And I will say this to you, a skilled realtor like you can catch one that's getting ready to go bad.
Proactively.
Oh yeah, you see it.
And can get it back on the tracks, right?
Yeah, no, listen, after a certain amount of time, there's not much new you see, maybe different people or different degrees, but essentially it's kind of the same problems over and over. 100%. I've had situations where we saved the day at the last minute. And the last thing I'll say about understanding the business, you also understand who you're working with, whether it be another realtor who knows what they're doing or doesn't, whether it be an escrow, title, or lender who really understands what they do. So when things go wrong, they can also be part of your team. Because the weak link in our business, and there's a lot of options for that, right? Between not only escrow, title, and lending, but there's also, people in the background and who they're working with and how you handle certain things. So we try to work with people, who consistently understand that we're on the same team, and communication is everything. So I love you nodding because you know it over and over.
No, it's like you're the quarterback of the deal. I always say, as a former quarterback myself, I mean, that's what you should be.
And I will call people, and I, when I start with an escrow, when we start with our side with escrow, for sometimes we'll use a different escrow officer, and I'll say, here's the way we do things here. And I always like to say, here's why, because they'll understand a little bit better the context of what you're saying. And, I had this discussion with somebody recently, and it was a new escrow person that I was working with. And she was like, that's really great to know, so we can be on the same page. Right. I got a call this morning from somebody, and before I responded to the client, I called the other broker. And that's another thing people don't realize is the opposing, if you want to call it opposing realtor, is actually your partner.
Sure.
Okay. Because if you go down, they go down. And what I find is there's this finger pointing. There's the subtle digs or the subtle undermining of the other person sometimes. It's like, that's not going to go well for you.
Yep.
You may think you're throwing them under the bus, but a lot of times it's coming back at you, or you're both getting fired, or you're both getting sued. And it's like, don't do that.
Yeah. And I have to say, that's called great leadership, because you're casting the vision, you're creating mutual expectations, you're creating alignment with everyone involved, and then everyone's swimming in the right direction, because things can very often take on a different complexion where ego sets in and who's right and who's wrong, as opposed to like, this is where we're trying to achieve. How do we work together to make that happen?
And don't confuse advocating your client for your client from being oppositional, because it's not the same.
And I was going to make that point, because you know, when you're saying, hey, we're in this dance together, it sounds like, oh, we're colluding or whatever. But the bottom line is, if you're representing a buyer who really wants this house, or you're representing a seller that really has accepted this offer, so this is a deal that works for them, you're already in this position where working together is going to help out. And the finger pointing and that sort of thing, when it comes to like, oh, well, my client wants, this much back after the inspections, there's definitely negotiation you're doing on behalf of your client, and you can advocate really well for your client, and still, there's different techniques to everything.
Sure.
When I go through with a client, when I go through the list of what the items that they want compensated for, if there are a couple that seem unreasonable to me, but the number itself doesn't look unreasonable, I go, you know what? Let's not give them the itemized list. Just say, hey, I need $75,000 back on this. And, once you start saying, $20,000 for the sewer line, like, well, what do you mean $20,000 for the sewer line? You're like,
And as a selling agent, so I've received those because I'm mostly a seller's agent. And when they give me an itemized list, which again is experience, something you've learned, right? I'll say, let's focus on the deal.
Yes, that's right.
Not focus on the oven spring.
Correct.
Right? Because yes, you're overpaying for that repair. The question is, and I've said this, and this is a great line I've used, is if I brought you this number when we started, non-contingent, would you have accepted it? Because I was dealing with a deal. The guy was an attorney, and he was clearly in a litigation mode, and he was actually yelling and pissed. And, this is ridiculous what they've asked for. And we had gone way over asking. And I said, when we started, if I said to you, would you take $2 million non-contingent to move forward? Would you have said yes? I stopped him, and he's like, yes. And I said, we're 100 over that. What's your issue?
That's right. Because, and that in essence is really advocating for your client while getting your client to swallow a pill that they don't want to swallow, because they're looking at the oven spring, to use your example. And let's say
that
the
is
oven
my example.
And if the oven spring on a very fancy oven, is $500 to fix, and they want $3,000, and they're you just be like, anybody would be irate about that. But you're now talking about, hey, we got you into escrow. I did very similar on my own house. I got a number that was much, much higher than what everybody else had predicted. And my answer to every one of the buyers, and the buyer is very sophisticated, commercial real estate developer, professional negotiator, and anything that he asked for, I was like, absolutely yes. And we can use your person. We can use my person. I can just credit it. I'm here to help.
It's not losing sight of the bigger picture.
Yes.
Right.
Stepping over
caught
dollars,
up in the minutia.
stepping over pennies to get dollars.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, I tell people, doors swing both ways. So when you ask for something from me, what am I going to get for you? And what I'm going to get from you is, we're going to move forward with the deal. But I'd like you to say that you purchased the property with all items and faults as discovered during the inspection process, and that we're moving forward based upon that assumption. Some sort of a waiver, some sort of something. And then you're actually getting something. And you can also say to very, very sophisticated clients, when you have a seller, right, is we're getting to, get something that says they've inspected to their full satisfaction.
And that's
valuable.
That's such a great, that right there is such a great piece of wisdom, because it does several things. Number one, it'll help a seller move to yes on those requests. And it also buys great peace of mind in what is, a very litigious world. We happen to be
especially in the epicenter of it.
We're at the epicenter of everybody wants to sue everybody. And you go, well, look, they want 75 grand for this. I agree with you, Mr. Seller. Like it's really probably worth 40 grand. So it's outrageous. Maybe let's try to get them to 65, which isn't much of a negotiation in your favor. However, I'm going to ask for this. And then we're like rock solid.
Right. And the other thing is, again, we're in the emotion business more than anything else. So when you go over ask, the buyers always want to bring it back to ask at least. All right. So some of that money, and that's really a challenge when we sell properties over asking. Is getting, getting back to, keeping as much of that as you possibly can. So expect dissatisfaction on the buyer side when they pay over asking. And you'll hear about it. It. Right?
So smart.
I paid this much over asking.
It's so smart.
Anticipate it.
That's what I was going to say. Anticipate.
Prep your seller. Okay. Because nobody feels good. And then put them in that place and say, how would you feel? Now, it's an arbitrary number. We all know that, but not in their head.
And that is
managing expectations proactively, and then having, to your point, the discipline to discern the emotion from the facts and the data,
and to put this into like numbers that fit in other areas. Let's say that you have a house that's a really great house, and it's your list price is 500. You did a great job staging and marketing, and you get the 575 accepted offer. Going to your seller and saying, hey, I've been down this road before, and we're delighted, by the way, with the agent and seller, we're delighted with the 575, but I've been down this road before. And then what happens after is they're really going to try and get like that 75 back in somewhere, because they go home and they're like, oh, I paid over asking. And so my job really is to protect that 75 as much as I can, but I just want to let you know what to expect. And and I worded all of that based on what David said, because I never thought to do that. That's really good advice. Great advice.
Thank you.
So tell us more, come back to the trust piece. I just want to dig a little bit deeper and how, like, your evolution in the trust sort of element of the business, and how that developed and what that looks like now. And
well, when I sold that first trust in 94, the attorney had said, and I was green. I didn't know what a trustee beneficiary was. She said, though, the way you handled it was something she hadn't seen before, because I came from the foreclosure world, the legal world. And she was really happy, and she started giving me a lot of business. So much so that her husband decided to get his license and I got knocked out of the box.
Wow. You didn't partner with the husband?
I didn't get the option, but I wish I had. And so I lost that chain of business, but fortunately I was able to pick it up elsewhere. And then just through the years, it became a niche of something I do. And I go into the high liability world, which I don't think anyone wants to go into, or very, very few people. And I also don't think they should, unless they really know what they're doing, because you're taking great risks at that point. That is the one thing is, again, it's like with luxury people are like, I want to sell a big house. When you're going head on into the legal world, it's like, start small, learn the business and really research it, because the stuff, we're not practicing law, but we are. Right. And you need to understand where your line stops. And that is a really important thing when it comes to trust sales is, understanding your lane very clearly. And I think that is something that a lot of agents don't really understand.
Explain to me what high risk sale, what does that look like?
Well, so the trustee has a great deal of liability when they're representing a property if there are contentious situations with the beneficiaries. When you have a corporate beneficiary, like a hospital or some other sort of charity, and they're given a percentage, they're going to look out for everything. And if they don't feel you did this right, you are a very easy source of money. And so is a trustee. It's a nice little add-on, and pretty much there's no perfect deal. So, you're pretty open unless you've absolutely dotted every, I and crossed every T, and backups and if you know a legal timeline. So we create a legal timeline throughout the process. And fiduciary duty and transparency is, so important, at a very, very high level.
So that's largely because you, to some degree, have a middleman being the trustee.
Yes.
Okay. And then the beneficiary, particularly if they're corporate, have deep pockets to potential.
Sure.
These are some of the, okay.
Yeah. But I got to tell you, if you have the other thing that David said was if you have beneficiaries that are not all in alignment. And I was thinking non-corporate. And if you think about any family, four kids and parents have a valuable asset, and now it's got to go through a trustee. I mean, they're all in disagreement.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I've had multiple co-trustees, corporate trustees, all in the same deal.
Yeah.
Kids who don't get along and then a percentage going to somebody else. It's like, it is a minefield.
So you just have a lot of different constituents who all have an interest that's often not in alignment, and you're sort of
100% not in alignment.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Right. Someone does want to sell and someone doesn't want to sell. Yeah. That's not alignment.
Okay. Yeah.
And then someone thinks,
and someone needs to be the scapegoat, and oftentimes it's the agent,
And someone thinks it's a great price, and the other person thinks it's a terrible price.
I was going to say, it's hard enough to manage expectations with your own client. Now you've got like multiple clients who have different agendas, and now you're trying to manage everyone's expectations. Right?
Yeah. And if you're, and the other thing that's really important is the trustee. So if the trustee is not strong and wants to make everyone happy, which a lot of times they do because they don't want to take the risk, then it drops down to the agent.
Yes.
So if the trustee is strong, you're in partnership and you're backing up the trustee and advising the trustee. But if the trustee is not strong, you're literally under the bus from when you start.
I would think that the trustee, in many cases, maybe I'm naive, but in human nature tells me that the trustee is going to generally be soft because they're going to have all these different. They're trying to please all these different people, and so if I had somebody to, I don't want to use if the trustee had somebody to hand off, to make somebody else the bad guy. Well, sure, we think we should get $7 million for the property too, but the realtor is telling us 5.5. So what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
And generally by nature, real estate agents want to please also.
That's true.
So, and they also don't want to get trouble. And I find a lot of realtors don't like saying no and don't like evoking anger.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's why I say it all the time. Anyone who's trying to please everyone is setting themselves up to fail miserably in life in general. And this is case in point.
And we work with a phenomenal business coach, and he just says, one of the things that he coaches, which is very obvious, is, take action, make decisions, right?
Yeah.
And knowing that, and this is the reason why people don't take action quickly and make decisions quickly, is, take action, make a good decision, but make a decision and understand that somebody's going to be pissed.
Yeah. I mean,
you're not going to make everyone happy.
You can go into your childhood here, but essentially, we're taught to be afraid of anger. When you're doing this, you can't, and you need to understand that anger is just a response. And get to the point of where did the anger come from? It's really, if you're living your life or running your career being afraid of anger, you're not going to deal with certain clients.
Yeah. I always say true leadership and value comes when you can create solutions in adverse situations. I mean, that's it. It's like everyone's great when things are going great.
Yeah.
The question is how real truth and skill and leadership, are revealed in challenging times and adversity. And that's where value really gets created.
When it goes wrong, it goes really wrong.
Yep.
I've had a lot of great mentors on the way, and one of them, actually Ricky Williams. I'll name drop him because we're going to get him on the podcast at some point.
Do you know who that is?
Okay. Oh, he's a very famous and infamous football player who got bounced out.
Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah. Heisman,
Texas Longhorns.
Yeah. So
Miami Dolphins, some other pro teams.
Controversial figure, but as it turns out, like incredibly nice guy and very wise. But he would say to me, so this anger or whatever is really, he would just sort of say, well, lump it into intensity. And what you're feeling now, I'm afraid of the anger, but that's also an intensity. And he would say, question to ask yourself is what is on the other side of that? And as you said, coming from being a little kid where you're little and, mom and dad represent sustenance and life, and making them angry is not necessarily a good biological
doesn't go in a plus category
outcome, that makes sense. And then what it feels like is on the other side of that intensity. It might feel very dramatic, like that. It feels like, I'm not saying we know it's not, but it feels like you're death or, something awful. And then what really lies on the other side of the intensity, and like worst case scenario is like, oh, they get so mad, they stay mad, they're going to fire you. And mostly that just doesn't happen. That's worst case scenario. And, and not even best case, but more often the case is they get super angry, they calm down, you work it through with them. And then they end up actually finding you to be more competent than the person that just smoothed it over.
Yep.
Yeah. I had a client say that to me. It was funny. He said, we were in the car and he said, do you like that person? And I said, yeah, he's a good broker. I know him well. And he goes, I don't like him. He said yes to everything I said, and it wasn't true, and I knew it. And he goes, you tell me,
the truth.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's so, don't tell people what you think they want to hear, or tell them the truth. And the right people respect that. And people can feel and sense that. You know what I mean?
I mean, my only comment, just as I've learned the hard way through the years, is we all have different truths too. What is truth for somebody may not be truth for somebody else. So be open to the fact that they may have a different truth, but yet, you still have to speak your truth and let them know that this is yours, my opinion. Yeah.
Okay. If somebody's watching this and they say, actually, like I'm a very careful broker associate, and I would like to do some trustee work. What do you think is a good way to start down that path?
Wow. My advice for that would be the same advice for people in general who are trying to climb the ladder, is partner with people who've done it. And
that's great.
And that was something that I did because I was spinning my wheels when I was younger. I hit kind of a plateau and I was like, why am I not at the next level? And I thought everyone, and I literally said this to myself, everyone that I'm afraid of, I'm going to partner with. And, who would I not want to be up against?
Yeah.
Who scares me the most? And
that's brilliant.
And I picked them. And, and then it was interesting because I wouldn't say I learned the secret sauce, but I kind of understood them a little bit better and it wasn't so scary.
And it wasn't so elusive. And so,
And when you pick them, so now you're like, okay, I know somebody who's in the trust category.
How receptive were they of working with you?
And how do you ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just said, hey, I respect you highly. I'd like to work with you. Can I bring you in on something? And
and the key is you brought them the opportunity.
Yes.
That's what I mean. Because otherwise, what's their incentive? Largely, I mean, most people aren't just that altruistic, to be honest. You know what I mean?
No.
Right.
I used to get calls all the time. It's like, hey, why don't we work together? I'm like, great. And they
what are you bringing?
Yeah, they'll say like, hey, can you bring me into something? I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, we come just to finish that up. We talk about all the time, like, how do you continue to grow and evolve and improve? And it's always about modeling others, right? Don't reinvent the wheel, model. And that's another way of modeling others, getting close to them.
Sure.
Bring something of value to them so they have an incentive to want to work with you. You can't just expect people to give you something without you giving first, right? That's what I call leadership. Like, give something of value first, and then people are inclined to reciprocate.
The sharing of listings, the working with other people, that's your college. Those are your dues. And people don't look at it that way. They look at it as like, I'm giving away money. Well, you do when you study to be a doctor. You're going to college, you're paying hundreds of thousands.
You're a business owner. You got to invest money to make money. I mean, that's what I had a conversation yesterday with an agent. You are launching your own business. What other businesses can you launch with virtually no startup costs?
And I'll say, or not.
Or not. 100% or not.
Right.
But if you're doing this the right way and you have the mindset and the actions like a David Kramer, it's a business. You got to spend money judiciously to make money,
And he's not, I know that David is not willy-nilly picking people to share a listing with. He's sharing a listing with somebody that he's like, this person's a killer. And, I'm going to learn so much. And the other thing too is that David's advice is mostly, sad to say, it's like mostly unusable, because what he's doing first is he is hustling to get that deal. So now it's his deal that he is sharing with somebody else. I mean, that is just, most of the people aren't doing the hustle to get the deal. They don't have the deal to share with the senior person. It's like.
So I want to come back to, and I know we have limited time, but you talked we asked you about your goals and what numbers you did, which is unique that you didn't really have a great idea. And we asked a couple of questions and quickly enough, you had a pretty good idea. But the point is, like, I wrote down progress and process. Those are my own words.
Yep.
And that's where correct me if I'm wrong, you seem to be focused. So reconcile that with me for a guy who's absolutely elite in the business by any measure in terms of how much business you do, how purposeful, how intentional you are. Like, your focus is on tell us what motivates you and what are the priorities on a daily basis, and what are the goals, and where does the gratification sort of come from?
I love the game. The game is so much fun to me.
The game, define the game.
Making the deals, achieving things that other people say you can't. Especially in a negotiation. We just closed something $3 million over asking. We had an appraisal about what we were asking. I knew we were underpriced, but I didn't think we're that much underpriced. It's one thing to get multiples and get over asking. It's another thing to exceed numbers that nobody could believe. And we've done it a lot of times. And I think the clarity comes when you only represent one side in a transaction, and have absolutely, if somebody in your team wins, you can get a piece, for example, you can get some money that way. Or whatever, it absolutely cannot be in your mind. It cannot be in your focus. Okay. When a lot of times people say, "Oh, I wrote an offer on your listing," I don't know, because I don't even know who represented what buyer. Sometimes I don't see it. I really don't like paying attention to it. My focus is so clear on the seller, on my client, on the fiduciary duty. And I think that clarity of thought, which you absolutely should have for what we earn. And that's another thing, is like, be grateful for how much money we make. What other businesses like this? Honestly, I could earn twice. Yeah. You could also earn nothing. And so be grateful for what you're getting, and understand that they've hired you and they believe in you, and that you have a duty to them to get the most money. And that to me is just paramount over everything else. Did I answer your question?
No, it's great. I mean, that focus is, and the gratitude and perspective. I mean, that, understanding that you're in a position and what your responsibilities are, and being grateful that the rewards are amazing when you really create value.
And I'm also always focused on the audience. And David also said that he had 2 full years where he made about $19,000. Yeah, it was 18.
Not quite 19.
Right.
Yeah, 18. Yeah, right.
I wrote it down. Yep.
And so
50, 18, 18. Right. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So the question is, it's easy for someone to say, I'm laser focused on the seller. But there's a time where you're earning 18 grand a year. So how do you do that while you're trying to build your business?
Listen, I feel getting in now or recently is probably the hardest it's ever been in the entire history of real estate. It's a tough business. It's always been a tough business. It's eat what you kill. There's no safety net. No one's doing you favors. And you really have to remember that again when people get into this business. So, having a second job is really important. I think as far as you want to, why not? I mean, it's like, I've done all kinds of things. I've worked, you have to just hustle. You have to work as hard as you can. That's this business. It's not easy. And when you look at who makes a lot of money, it's a very, very small percentage. So you have to have your expectations managed and really, think thoroughly about how this is going to work. But I'll say that I think the hardest part of this business is when you're working your way up and you are struggling is working with people who you're never going to make money and then not working with them and firing them. And that's hard when you're not making a lot of money and you're not doing well, but you have to understand what they take from you. They take everything from you. They take your energy, they take your spirit, they take your drive, because you think that if I just work a little harder, I'm going to make that money. And you might, but what's left? And,
such a great, that's great advice, because we really do see new realtors that are, I'm not going to sign a buyer representation agreement. Bring me something great. I'll use you. Or even on the sell side, they have some astronomically high number. Like, we'll give you the listing if you bring us the, buyer that's 20% over market.
And it's like, you got to know your value, and you actually have to have value, which means you have to be prepared. You have to be knowledgeable. You have to do the work.
Yeah.
Right? There's no shortcuts.
And listen, there's a lot of realtors who take those overpriced listings because it's a business strategy.
Yes.
Okay. Smart.
Yep.
No issue. Know what you're doing. But I used to, I'll say the one question you didn't ask me is, when did I know my career turned from being a regular business to a good business? When I fired my first client. And I remember where I was when I fired my first client. I was in his driveway because he called me when I was leaving a showing, and he's like, "What happened?" And he used to sit in the house when I did showings. And I could hear him listening to me and commenting that I got it wrong. And then finally, as I was, the one time he wasn't in the house, I was leaving and my phone rings. So it's like, I can't even get out the driveway. And I said, listen, I just don't think we should be working together. And he was mad, had a lot of anger. And he said, fine, you're fired. And he went and hired somebody else. And like 6 months later, he called me back and he goes, I've been through hell, because he was so difficult. And he said, I want to work with you. What do we need to do? And I said, let's sit down and let's have a conversation. I was still pretty young. So I think, like that, you can call it whatever you want. But that was kind of a turning point in my career. And I'll just leave you with this is, I used to joke with people and say, you can make more money going to the beach than you will with that client. Yeah. So I'll tell you a quick story. A few years ago, I had kind of a devastating moment in my life and my career when I had some issues with, some people that I really trusted. And it was so hard for me. And I wasn't going to get out of the business, but it just turned me upside down on my end, where I didn't know which way was up. And I was like, I got to get out of town. I need to get out of town. And it was Friday, and I called up this spa, this like where you don't eat and they give you liquid and the whole bit. And I was like, do you have any space? And they said, we only have the big suite. And I said, I'll take it. I don't really care. I'm coming today. And I drove out there and I started with my liquid diet and no exercise because you don't have enough calories. And I went through this whole kind of period of thinking. And then I meet somebody and we start talking, and he was an interior designer from New York. And he was an interesting guy. And I was like, I like this guy. I really enjoy his company. And he said, let's keep in touch. It's not going to help me, So I thought, he was in another state and interior designer. And he said, let me introduce you to a friend of mine, contractor, and you guys might get along. And I was like, cool. And I had lunch with him, and I had one of the best lunches of my life. And I meet this guy, and I'm like, I don't know if he can help me, but I just think this is a solid guy and an amazing guy, and I want him in my life. And I think he felt the same. We became very quick friends. He's my best referral source I've ever gotten in my life. And out of the ashes. And it was just a lesson to me of like, it was my fault that I put myself in that position previously, because I was trying too hard to do something I shouldn't be doing again, I now am in a very different place than I was even a few years ago.
That's amazing.
So it's about self-respect. It's about, knowing your value, everything we say.
Yeah, and listening to your intuition, which takes time to develop that level of self-confidence, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah.
One of the things I took a note on from early in the podcast was that you talked about, while you don't measure commissions and set goals for number of deals or whatever, but that your words were very action oriented. So are you measuring your actions? Are you like waking up and saying, when I get this much done in a day, then I've had a good day? Or what does that mean?
I should. I should. Great advice. I'm glad I came. It's
Thank
more about how can I make some business today or not? If it's going to be a dedicated or not day, then make it a dedicated or not day. But mostly Monday through Friday, I wake up and go, I need to create one piece of business today at a minimum. Like, what am I doing today? And again, it could be going to the beach. It could be going somewhere, not usually, but it's something to help create the opportunities that I need to create. It's going through my database. It's calling people. And the other thing is, we always look for a direct ROI, which I think is very transactional. And I find a lot of times agents can be very transactional. Have lunch with somebody and get out there. Because you may see someone at the table next to you. That person may say, you know what, I hadn't thought about you. Because our business is very interesting. It's not always that you're good. It's not always that you're high profile. Sometimes it's just being in the right place at the right time. The last person you spoke to go, you know what, I was just thinking about this. And that because you've gotten the call where somebody said, oh my God, I made a mistake. I didn't think about you for my listing. I mean, that's happened to all of us. It's because you weren't top of mind. So keeping in touch with people is actually the best ROI. It's much better than an ad or a postcard. And it's not expensive. It's like,
be curious, be engaged, take initiative, and just put yourself out there, be on the playing field, and be open-minded with gratitude and positivity. And it's like, good things happen, but it is coming back to, I always say action is the antidote.
Absolutely.
Right. And don't attach yourself to the outcome, embrace the process.
Right.
Now,
you say it much better than I do.
I've had a lot of practice.
You said when you wake up in the morning on a dedicated day,
which is almost every day, but
okay, good. Well, good to know.
Which I like, but you're intentional when it's not dedicated. What I'm hearing is like, David's like, this is a day I'm going to let myself just do what I want to do. So it's very purposeful and intentional. You're managing your own expectations, and that I think people lose sight of, like how important that is, right?
That's cool already, because often, I generally do not do that. And I think saying, you know what, I'm not going to do any business at all today would be a good exercise for me, because, and to be likewise,
we work relentlessly.
We really do. Right? And sometimes on the dedicated day, I'm not as, dedicated as maybe I would be if I had that dichotomy of dedicated, not dedicated. So when you wake up on a dedicated day, and you ask yourself this question of, how do I create one piece of business today? What are the different things that you would do in a day to create one piece of business?
Make some phone calls. Just start calling professionals that you haven't spoken to in a long time. I did hear something a long time ago I used to do seminars. I was on all the seminar chains. Is you can get a client and a listing, or you can get a client and multiple listings. So if you have a group of people who can give out listings, they should be called at least every 3 months, just a check-in.
And what do you say to them?
How's it going?
Do you remind them like, I'd like some referrals?
Sometimes, but not always. Yeah. It depends. I mean, it's a little bit longer of a process. I'm probably a little bit of a gentler hand than I maybe should be. They know a lot of times why you're calling and you're fresh. But the other thing I'll say is, as a salesperson, I appreciate when somebody knows I want their business, and telling somebody that you want to work with them and that you would appreciate working with them, I think is important too.
Yep.
When I go on a listing appointment, I let them know this is important to me.
Yep.
And this means a lot to me. And I'm here. If you want me to come back again, I'll be here again because I want to work with you.
Yep.
And I think like we don't say that.
I do. But I think you're right. Very few do. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we
do. Yeah. We do. That's that's a mantra. We're not going to,
you don't ask, you don't receive.
Yeah.
And you've got to create value. You can't expect anything if you're not going to actually lead with creating something. It's got to be something in it for them, right?
Would they do that?
Yeah.
Would somebody give you business?
Right.
If, come to this car dealer and give me the money. I'm not going to give you the car.
Right. Yeah.
But
what value do you offer? Like, let's say you're calling, like you say, you're calling a professional. Maybe the professional is a lawyer. I refer people to lawyers. I like to refer them to lawyers that I think would be great for the particular thing they're looking for. I refer a lot
of legal.
Yeah. And what do you do with the like, hey, you must be getting some clients that need a realtor. How do you make that crystal clear?
If you're referring,
you just did.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just like that. I don't believe in beating around the bush. I also think create, like if you're a younger person in the business or newer, I should say, create a circle of professionals that you can grow with. I think it's important to work with people who you trust and like and feel will do right by your client, because there's a lot of people, and I've had this where they'll say like, I'll give you business if you give me business. And I don't think they're necessarily who I would want to refer my clients to. And I don't.
Of course.
That's your credibility on the line.
It's same chain,
Yep.
Is having these really good people and then referring them business. I've had situations where I referred a lot of business to somebody because I just thought they were good. And as a matter of fact, I had a call this morning with somebody on my team and said, now we're going to call the guy and see if he could send something our way. But we've, without question, expectation, or a word, have been referring a few lawyers some business and not asking for anything. Now we're going to. But I felt they were professional. I felt they were good, and I felt they took care of my clients.
Yep. Ready to go fire round?
Oh boy.
Let me see if I have one question. Yeah, I have a cleanup question too.
Are we okay on?
Yep.
Okay. Particularly when earlier is when I made a note to myself, but this could be now as well. Either way, like who do you like really admire in the real estate world? I'm curious, like who, even when you were younger, who were you modeling and emulating? Who were you looking up to? Like when you were making $18,000, that's when I made a note to myself. I'm like, what gave you the confidence and conviction that this can be something amazing?
Well, I mean, one person, you want names.
or you can just tell me about the person. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's always been people I admire. I'll tell you the interesting thing.
And obviously that evolves who you admire.
Yeah. Well, there's one person that I've always admired, and I do today, and that's Joyce Ray.
Okay.
100%.
Can I ask why?
I think she's elegant. I love her spirit. I think she's, my dealings with her, and I'm going to say Linda May as well. I don't want to forget Linda. Linda's done some wonderful things for me as well, where one of my clients called her and she said, I won't work without David. I know you were working together, and I just respect them both highly. There's other people I respect highly. I won't name competition and all.
Yeah.
That, and the other thing that I'll say, which is really important, is I used to respect everybody who made a lot of money when I was young. Right. And once I started partnering with them, I didn't. respect them as much, because I saw that I was the one creating the aura around them that wasn't necessarily deserved. You know,
and I got to say this because I'm passionate about it. Sorry to cut you off. I always, coach people, and this comes from my own experience, model and emulate those that are where you want to be.
Of course.
Don't just look at the results. Look at how they got there. Look at the process, the values, the beliefs, what they've done to get there, because they may have great accolades, but how they would go about doing it and how they got there is not congruent with how you would want to get there. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. So when you just said that to me is how I translate that.
And I haven't said it in a long time because it was so part of, I modeled my book after it. And that was be, do, have. And the confusion that the outside world has on that. And I don't know why I sort of always gravitate toward Oprah Winfrey, because this is an old example, but, people would look at her and say, if I had what she had, if I had what she has, right, I could do what she does, and then I could be who she is. And one of the reasons why it's a great example is because she really came from nothing. And I guarantee you, she was being Oprah Winfrey before she ever made $1. And because she was being Oprah Winfrey, she was doing what Oprah Winfrey was doing, which is the action. And then after all of that is when she finally got what Oprah Winfrey has. And so it's when you look from the outside, it's like, yeah, I mean, if I had a $20 million sale under my belt, I'd have all the marketing money that I would ever need. And then I could be like, then I could be like David, and really it's the being comes first.
Yep. And comes back to like play the long game with urgency, with consistency.
Yeah,
and that's
very much
that. And most people just don't have the discipline or the consistency to do that. And therefore they're not great.
And one of the questions sort of I wanted to come back to is that, you mentioned a question that sometimes people ask you, and guess what? They ask us all the time.
Sure.
And that is, somebody comes to you and say, hey, I really want to get into luxury. Right. How do I do that? What, maybe how do you answer them, but what's the real answer in case that happens to be different? Because I'm curious to know
this answer, because we get asked it all the time.
Because we have our answers.
Right. I mean, in a way, if you're asking, you're probably not going to get into luxury. I'll say that, because you're not doing, there's an instinctual thing about understanding, levels of service, humbleness. If you approach somebody and say, how do I get into luxury? It just kind of depends. If they want to go from point A to point Z, it's just never going to happen. But study, learn, observe, share, put yourself in the places, that luxury exists. But I also interviewed a lot of people when I was running Hilton and Highland, and I got asked the question, and it just seemed like everyone wanted to jump into it. And owning fancy things is not luxury. It's luxury is really service, right? That's what you pay for. You pay for service. And the question is of how luxurious we're talking about in our business. I think in our business is hiring somebody who A, puts you first, end of story, B, gets ahead of your needs, anticipates things that you may not even understand. I mean, the whole process, and also realize that the process is ugly sometimes. I think for the most part, there's almost no real estate transactions that feel good. There's always emotion. There's always some anger. There's always stress. So understanding that as an agent also, and compensating for that, and just saying like, I know this sucks. And just, it always sucks. But in the end, it's, I can't tell you how many times I've said to people that being patient is how you get the right house. And if this isn't the right house, if you don't feel good, if this process feels so bad to you that, maybe this isn't the right house. And I've had people say, that's what doesn't feel good. And we back out.
Mm-hmm.
That's luxury.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. One of the things that you have to, at the level you are, your clients, as smart as you are and the decades of experience you have, which is really very singular in a way, it just does not happen that often. You're still dealing with, if it's the $20 million house, you're still dealing with like the head of a private equity firm or the mad lawyer, so many years ago, when you didn't have that kind of experience. What do you do to climb when you are climbing that ladder? You're climbing that ladder. I hear you. You're climbing that ladder with service. Okay. What do you do with, a client that like somehow we feel like this client is so much more sophisticated than me? How do I deal with that?
If they're more sophisticated, obviously it depends on which way, but you can be a real person and say, I'm not fully understanding the situation or what your needs are, and I want to learn. It's not a bad thing to do, is be a human.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you,
I would agree.
And I'll tell you, I'll give you an interesting example. I had the opportunity to have several conversations with a guy named Barry Sternlicht, and Barry,
sure.
Yes, yeah. And
easygoing.
Yeah, easygoing guy. And Barry has a reputation and very smart. He's the founder of Starwood Capital, and he was interested in understanding aspects of the residential real estate world. And a guy that he was business partners with said, I'm going to refer you. Would you mind talking to Barry Sternlicht? I'm like, it would be amazing. He goes, okay,
yeah,
well,
sure.
Now that you said yes, now let me tell you, first of all, I may not, now that I know you're willing, I may not put you on the phone with Barry. So let's talk about this a little bit. And one of the things that he reminded me right before I got on the first call with him was he said, remember, Barry's calling you about residential real estate in LA, California, maybe further than that. And that's what he wants to know. And I'm putting you in touch with him because that's what you know. And my advice to you is don't talk finance with Barry. And it seemed a little odd, the advice, but see, you just get this absolute guru in this one area. And so it's sort of a good North Star to be like, I'm going to talk about what I know in a very knowledgeable way because I am. And if we stray from that, I'm going to be like, hey, I don't know. And sure enough, like he asked me a very basic finance question. And because that guy had prepped me, I was like, hey, you know what, Barry, you're the finance guy. I don't know the answer to that. And he was like, oh, okay, next. And then when I got off the phone with him, the referral calling back, he goes, oh, the call went great. And I used your advice. He asked me this and he's like, wait, Barry asked you, like, are you kidding me? Like, he knows that. He knows the answer. I'm like, well, good, because I didn't. And I used your advice. And so I think that there is this, when you climb into an upper echelon, you have to have some expertise or they shouldn't hire you. Mm-hmm. And so what is that thing that that they don't know? It might be the California Association of Realtor Contract, like the back of your hand. And now, even if you're dealing with a very smart lawyer, I've got the contract memorized. They're going to find that very, very impressive. It could be that you understand the finance of real estate, but you're dealing with a tremendously successful business person that might not know finance. It's like, stay with what you know and don't worry about it.
Value proposition.
And we also talked about staying in your lane, previously. And so I had a deal several years back, and it was a very, very big deal. And I had a very, very unique, tough seller. So tough that it was just brutal all the way around, and I stuck to it. And I think one thing that's really important when you're dealing with somebody at that level is also be open to what lessons you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is we made this deal happen by the skin of our teeth. It was just, I can't say tough enough. But when I had the next very big deal, multiple lawyers and everything, and it was also, I could see this coming. I had learned some great lessons from that person who maybe I didn't like or appreciate at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, I know what to ask for because this guy was so hard on me that I now have learned something. And when I went into the next deal, I did something. And when I did it and I told them that I had done it, the people were like, nobody has ever thought of that before.
Yeah, amazing.
You know, so instead of feeling like a brutalized victim, like be open to what lessons am I learning.
Sure.
I think of it as hard makes easy in many cases. So that's the reality.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
fire round.
It's 2:00.
Do we want to do, can we?
You're going to help me on this.
All right. So this is the fire
it.
round. It's
Yes.
designed to be quick, simple, off the cuff
Go
answers.
for it.
No
I'll probably
response. All right.
not have an answer.
Yeah. What's the best compliment you've ever received?
I'm going to kiss up to you guys. Just being invited is impressive because obviously, you know, I must know what I'm doing to some degree. So
For
I'm grateful.
sure. I mean,
you know, I think when people ask you for advice who you respect,
Yeah.
you know.
Thank you.
yep.
What's an insult you've received that you're proud of?
A few weeks ago, I was told I'm disgusting by one of my beneficiaries and trustees. And I was like, okay, I'm getting somewhere. And the interesting part of it was, without giving up too much, when we were done, the result of the sale was so over that person's expectations, they didn't know what to do with it.
Wow.
But I evoked the anger during the deal that I needed to evoke, if that makes sense.
Yep. Love it.
You know,
not a people pleaser. I like it.
Yep. What talent would you most like to have?
I'd love to be more disciplined in my day. That's something I'm just not great at. I lose a lot of time. So if I was more efficient, then I would have more free time.
What's your greatest extravagance?
Travel. Love travel.
What's your greatest achievement?
Boy, I think just being happy with what I do is so important to me. You know, I still love the business. And, you know, listen, you give up a lot of social life in this business if you want to do well. If I didn't love what I do, I would be very unhappy, and I'm not. I'm really happy with what I do, even though it drives me, you know, crazy sometimes, but I just enjoy it almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise.
David, you go on a hike. There's some wonderful hikes in LA.
Yep.
And you go up a very steep path and you get to the very top of that hill and you look down and you see your family and your friends and your colleagues and everyone else that you work with below, and you shout one thing. What do you shout?
Just appreciation. And for everybody. And I do actually make a point of telling people, you know, when I appreciate them. I just think that's so important. And I think we don't get that always growing up, you know, and I really try to tell people in my life that I appreciate them and I'm grateful.
Nice.
We're so grateful to have you here.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
amazing.
Really,
so much fun.
Yeah, really great.
Yeah, I'm about to take this
Thank you so much.
Phenomenal. Really appreciate it.